The podcast that floats down here.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast that floats down here. I'm Ben. I'm your host again for today, and I'm joined as always by our new reader.
Hi, it's Luke.
And our Stephen King expert.
That would be me. I'm still Melissa.
Still Melissa.
Still Melissa.
Haven't changed.
And tonight, this morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night, we are going to be covering Part 1, The Shadow Before, Chapter 3, 6 Phone Calls, 1985, Section 5, Beverly Rogan Takes a Whuppin'. Hey Luke, take it away.
Sitting with her drunk husband Tom, Beverly Rogan answers a phone call. Bev dismisses Tom's demand to know who is on the phone, which alerts Tom that she might need a few refresher lessons. Tom grabs another drink from downstairs and is painfully aware of his heavy heartbeat as he climbs back up the stairs. Waiting outside the door, Tom overhears that Bev is speaking with someone
named Mike, and he reminisces about meeting Bev and realizing that she had emotional vulnerability that he could exploit for his own use. Then he hears the snap of a cigarette lighter, and the rage in his stomach arises as she mentions to Mike that she'll need a room reserved before she hangs up. Tom thunders back into the room, ready to let her have it, only to see her packing a bag. She had a focused and determined expression that Tom had only seen when she was working on the climax of a project she cared about. Tom remembers back to a time when he firmly defines their relationship to her. Specifically, when he demanded that she never smoke in front of him. And when she had breached that rule, he physically abused her as punishment and told her that she could take a walk if she didn't want to play by his rules, which she therefore agreed to follow. He follows up this abuse with using her in bed. After she says she does not want to have sex, he thought her eyes told a different truth. The two were married 3 months later. Bev was smoking on the phone with Mike. So, Tom Rogan nonsenselessly got his belt in preparation for the lesson she would need to revisit. Getting the belt reminded Tom of his own abusive upbringing with his mother. He makes his presence known to Bev, and she was reminded of the no smoking clause in their relationship. She puts out the cigarette immediately and begins to explain what the phone call was. But he doesn't have time for that and lays into her shouting, which seems to have no effect on her, which pisses him off further. He whips her with the belt instead of letting her explain that Tom had read one of her old friend's books, to which she hadn't made the connection to until now. The frightened Bev was not showing up as he whipped her again, and she grabbed the belt, almost ripping it from his hands. He follows her around the room, delivering blow after blow with the belt. Still not crying, Bev takes off across the room and fires cosmetic projectiles at her tormentor. This proves enough of a break in Tom's pursuit that she snapped and screamed at him that she was leaving and threatened him that she will kill him if he tries to stop her. He charges at her and she trips the mantle over on him, which takes him down to the ground, and he loses the handle on the belt. She snatches the belt and uses it on him, breaking his teeth and then breaking his balls, all the while reminding how she had craved the humiliation and pain he had delivered to her over the years. Bev finishes packing and leaves the house, walking the streets with no particular direction. She laughs, feeling free and exhilarated.
All right, thank you, Luke. Melissa, what are your feelings on Bev?
Tom is a fucking asshole.
Yes.
Just gonna start there.
No, he absolutely is. And my note to that, even though he is a dick, he's the perfect case of the abuser becomes the abusee becomes an abuser. The vicious cycle of it happened to him when he was a kid, and he's taking it into his own life. Not justifying it, not saying it's right, but it's again another perfect case of, there's a spin around. It just circular.
You said spin around. Now I'm singing you spin me right.
Is that Culture Club?
No. Is it?
That's Culture Club. Boy
Okay.
George.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Like, and my thought was like, this is a classic domestic abuse relationship.
Oh yeah.
Even how Stephen King describes Tom as looking for someone like Beverly all his life. It's not like looking for her like I'm looking for my soulmate. No, I'm looking for somebody that I can manipulate and control.
Yeah.
Somebody that has these very specific emotional vulnerabilities, like I said in the executive summary. I mean, like, he even describes it as being like a lion that only he can smell that on her, and he takes a bite. Like that lion just, he can't even control it himself.
Like, he knew he wanted somebody weak. He knew he wanted somebody who wouldn't stop him from hurting her. I cannot imagine being in that kind of situation, but apparently maybe I don't get off that scent.
Yeah, no, and it's
so foreign to me.
I think King does a great job of kind of giving you hints to, like, the very first time he hit her. She didn't have a look of scared. She didn't have a look of fear. It was nostalgia, maybe,
And
like
recognition,
like this is normal, and so it's kind of one of those, like, what the fuck happened to her as a kid to react that way, so it's kind
And
of,
she just straight up asks, why did you do that? Like, what's your justification for doing this? I'm okay with it. Just, what's the issue? Yeah, she's damaged. Like, she's definitely seen some stuff.
I'm gonna throw something out there that if you want an even deeper delve into the psyche of a domestic abuse relationship, Stephen King has another book that's sort of the main catalyst, and it's called Rose Matter. I would say it's one of his lesser known works. Like, it's not as famous as some of the others, but man, it does such a great job of getting down into like how to abuse and where to hit and how to control and how to pull somebody out and make sure that they're not socializing with it. And then what happens when she doesn't allow that anymore. And then it gets Stephen King and dark and twisty and supernaturally, but it's really good. Okay. I will say, like, it was very hard to take notes on this section because I was so angry and so livid.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about what Tom does to her.
Well, let's be clear. She didn't follow the lessons that they established. That's on her.
You're not funny.
It's not funny.
but there wasn't
It's not funny.
It's not
Like,
funny, but there was an agreement made. It's not saying it's right, but there was an agreement made. She didn't fall through. I'm not, his reaction.
He's a...
I know this. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that she couldn't act surprised. And when it does come around, when it, at this time, that goes to the switch. That goes to, fuck you. I'm done with you. You don't matter to me. Beforehand, she accepted it. She took what he gave and whatever. After the phone call, she knew this guy does not fucking matter, and I'm going.
Let's talk about that moment.
Yeah.
When she gets that phone call and he's watching her from up until that point. This entire section was written from Tom's point of view.
Yes.
Which I was not one way or the other about, because with Stanley, we got it from his wife's point of view. With Ben, we got it from the point of view of
Richie.
the bartender.
Ricky.
But Richie and Eddie did their own, so it kind of made sense. This chapter should be from the point of view of somebody else, right? Back and forth. But there was a moment, right when she launched the vanity at him, there was a paragraph that lost perspective. This paragraph was not from Tom's perspective anymore, but it really wasn't from anybody else's. It was just sort of a factual statement, this happened paragraph. And after that paragraph, the rest of the section was from the point of view of Beverly. And that moment when King takes the power away from Tom and gives it to Beverly, and you finally see inside her head, what a smart way to show the power in the room. And honestly, I had never caught it before. I had never noticed that shift until this read through.
See, and I didn't actually catch it until I did my notes and then read your notes and was like, oh shit. And so I went back and reread it again. And I'm like, oh, that is very smooth. And because I didn't even catch it on this slow read through and everything. Yeah, no, it was very cool. And then seeing that shift of power and seeing her stand up and just start wailing on him and going and even waiting downstairs. You know, she already had it in her head waiting to hear those steps come that never came. And finally she was like, I'm free. And walked out and just, you see the elation. But then also there's a realization of shit, what am I going back to?
But for her, as opposed to the other characters, where that was so scary.
There's
for her,
nothing to come
no matter
back
where
to.
she's going, I'm not going to miss it.
Right, I'm better off regardless of
Right.
what happens. Like, she has a
Right.
completely blank slate to work with on whatever they're going back to Derry for.
This was very difficult for me to read. I have a problem with that kind of relationship. It's hard for me to accept.
Oh, yeah, no.
Any
Yeah,
of it,
he definitely...
but-
I'm going to go ahead and read that chapter, and just to show the...
For that paragraph.
That
whole
paragraph. I'm going to read
That
the whole
section.
All
paragraph.
99 pages.
Yeah, let's read this whole chapter, word for word, backwards. So it says, for a moment the table tottered on an angle, and then she shoved herself forward again. The vanity waltzed on one leg, mirror catching the light and reflecting a brief swimmy aquarium shadow across the ceiling, and then it tilted forward and outward. Its leading edge slammed into Tom's upper thighs and knocked him over. There was a musical jingle as the bottles tipped over and shattered inside. He saw the mirror strike the floor on his left and threw an arm up to shield his eyes, losing the belt. Glass coughed across the floor, silver on the back. He felt some of it sting him, drawing blood. The next paragraph begins with, now she was crying. Her breath was coming in high, screamy sobs. The very first word is italicized. It says now. So it's almost like now we're switching where our perspective is going to. We're now going with the real person of the story.
And even think about the words in that transition paragraph. It starts with teeter-tottering, the unbalance.
It waltzed
the shift.
across the floor.
Or even how much it talks about the mirror and the light shifting off the mirror. It's very Alice through the looking glass.
Yeah, and the way the light
The world
reflects on the
changes.
ceiling and it shimmers and waves. Artistically it's very interesting the way that that stood out to me too. I didn't catch the same narrative perspective switch that you were talking about. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because going back to it now in italics, that's really neat. I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm. He's so smart. Stephen King, you are so
He's
smart.
a smart guy.
You are welcome on the show anytime you'd like, Steve.
Yep, we will clear a spot for you. We have an extra mic. You're welcome.
But I
Or
do.
Germ.
Yeah.
You're welcome on this show too if you want.
Exactly. Or both.
Or both. We got extra microphones all over the place.
Yeah. So I will say I enjoyed this chapter, and that sounds weird to say, but I enjoyed the chapter to see Beverly make that switch. You hear the backstory, you hear what she's been going through in her adult life with Tom, and then you finally, see that boiling point. She hangs up the phone, and it's on. And it is really cool to see somebody finally break from that vicious cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, hopefully it stays that way, but we'll have to keep reading to see.
I like that she's able to, break the chains of this misogynistic sadist who has controlled her entire life. And I mean, she's been pretty successful too. We haven't talked about that yet. She's a very, very well respected fashion designer.
Yep.
And she fell into that too.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, another one, because they're in Chicago, correct?
Yep.
I mean, it seems like another one of those. It took a little bit of luck, and they're doing okay. Like they're not hurting for money. We don't get a whole lot on their financial side, but you don't get the feeling that they're struggling at all.
Well, I think at this point you have the impression that they're all doing well. Like,
Yeah.
I
Right,
think
yeah,
that's
I
been
agree.
firmly established.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's all I had. I liked seeing her break those chains as well, and that she is also has a high skill set.
Melissa, any final thoughts on this chapter?
Well, it's something that I just thought of as we've been going through each of these characters, as they're sort of building on each other from character to character to character. Last episode, we really talked about how, where is the power in the Eddie Myra relationship, and that when he finally did yell back at her, the line was, I might as well have hit her, right? Yelling at her was so bad because she's so fragile that I might as well be hitting her. And then King comes, and the immediate next section is, oh, you think that was bad? Let's actually hit her. And let's not only hit her, let's introduce the fact that most likely she was probably hit as a kid. There's something to that look of recognition, that look of familiarity when she got hit that first time. Like, this is not new.
I know we're, supposed to focus mostly on her, on Beverly this chapter. The one thing, since we did have Tom's perspective, that kept coming up, basically he keeps questioning, am I even here? Like, am I real right now? Like, his sense of identity is so threatened by her not conforming to what he's trained her to be. Like, I don't know, do you have any thoughts on his just not being able to understand, like not be there anymore? Like, what's going on in his mind with that, do you think?
On this one, it's basically it's sociopathy. It's all about him. It's his way. It's his rules, his regulations, his everything. And if you don't follow it, you pay the price. You get a whooping, just like he had to when he was a kid. If he didn't follow the rules, didn't take, even if he left his little brother or whatever with the dirty diaper, didn't clean that up, he got a whooping. All that, and he's basically turned that around to where now it's his control. He's in control. He's power.
He's made it.
He's made it, and now it's my rules. It doesn't matter if I'm living off your money, but he doesn't care about that because he's the one that made her.
I have two thoughts.
Okay.
One is kind of funny, and one is more of a question. So my funny thought is, when you say he used to be the abused kid and now he's the abuser, it has to be his way, I had a flashback to Shades of Grey.
Okay, never read it.
Didn't read it.
Have read.
No.
I don't recommend it. Sorry.
Yeah.
I've tried. It's not well written.
I've never had a positive review. So
I have, of course, read all three of the series simply because once I start a series,
if you
it's
start
impossible
one,
for me not to.
that's how I was with Twilight. Yeah. I read book one. There was no stopping.
But that starts with him. Like, you find out that Dorian Gray had been like I don't even remember the terms, but he'd been like the submissive one, and then became a dominant. And it's like, same concept, not really, but slightly more healthy way of attributing that need, whereas this is obviously not. So that was kind of my funny, weird connection piece. My second one is, so I agree with you, Benji, he is a total sociopath. But Luke's question about this whole I'm not here, am I even here thing, do you think he's so insecure that his sense of identity is compromised when he's not being followed or
his reality is threatened is the feel that I get from it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And is that the definition of sociopath that I don't understand as well as you do?
Yeah,
I think you do.
Sociopath is basically everything is about you. You are the center of the universe on different levels. And so it's one of those, you don't care. It's lack of empathy. It's lack of remorse. But basically,
from dictionary.com, we'll just be as straightforward as this. A person with sociopath, a person with a personality disorder manifesting itself in extreme antisocial attitudes and behavior and lack of conscience.
Yeah,
that's it. Right there.
Lack of conscience. So I knew I was right in the terminology, just reasoning, but it's still the same. It falls under a few different mental illnesses that he's going through, but that's the broadest one. Yeah, his whole life is about being in control, and if it's not in control, his whole idea of self is gone, or it's being threatened.
His purpose for being is to control this other person. If this person isn't here, he has no purpose.
Kind of, yeah.
And therefore no being.
Exactly.
Okay.
Melissa, as we've been doing for the last few episodes, we're going to introduce what roles these main characters play in the Losers Club, or how they fit in. How does Beverly get her initiation?
I think it's as the beaten and abused wife / possibly daughter at this point, having to, living with being an abused child or woman.
As far as we know now, that is pretty much her fitting place. Thank you for joining us again today. Join us for our final episode of this chapter. We'll be covering section 6.
Bill Denbrough takes time out.
As always, stay imaginary. Thanks.